Welcome back, everyone. We are in an era of witch hunts. It's an era where audiences don't trust a word or an image coming from any company, and increasingly, they are being proven right to do so. We've got the large language model-backed AIs, we've got the image generation AIs, and these really are the next big technological thing. And look, for many fields, even say thinking about processing images, like medical imagery, right? Trying to do diagnostic work. There's actually useful applications of this sort of technology. The problem is, though, bring that into the games industry, and just like with blockchain before it, every executive is just looking for a way to make some money, and they are rubbing their hands with glee. Maybe they're rubbing their hands with glee thinking about how many people they no longer need anymore and can fire with no negative consequences, right? And of course now, this problem is getting so entrenched that even when it's not intentional, it can't be avoided. Today, I'm going to take you through the events of the past few weeks, for there have been many of them, and cover almost every example of how this tech is going wrong to show you how stupid the use of so much of this is, and then detail the unfortunate reality that this is going to be something that will be a threat both to the development of games, also to the marketing of games, and it will be a threat for a very long time. But of course, we can't do any of that without the support of viewers like you and those who support us over at bellular.ghost.io. That's where you can get Loading Screen, which is our daily publication, as well as a whole bunch of extra content for what we do. You can also then get over to our members lounge, where we chat about things with our members, and it's the best way to support what we're doing. So check out the link below. With that said, let's get stuck in. To set the tone, here is a beautiful Christmas card from the team at ID at Xbox, which is their indie wing. Now, look at this too closely, and you might begin to realize, hang on a second, this looks a little bit fishy, because yes, people rapidly did identify that this is in fact an AI generation, and to be honest, it's not even a particularly good AI generation. Personally, I'd think of what you can do in Photoshop. I think of Midjourney version 6, and of course DALL-E with ChatGPT that has decently good coherence. So a bunch of weird things are going on in this image. People looked at it. Obviously, this is the indie wing, which means that indie developers will not be happy about this. And yes, Xbox deleted the thing. As for how they did this, well, it's Xbox. You would very much imagine, given their they're part of Microsoft. Microsoft has got a very close tie with OpenAI, that it is based on their technologies. But that, of course, is just the taster. That's just the little tone setter, because now we've got the weekend of absolute hell, where it turns out, right, if your primary audience is actually artists, and you perhaps make tools for artists, maybe the AI stuff will not go down well. And that's what takes me to Wacom. Now, Wacom tablets have been used to draw the assets for, honestly, the vast majority of video games that you have played. They are the absolute undisputed industry champion. A lot of people actually are quite angry at Wacom because, to be honest, they've been pretty lax, because they haven't really had amazing competition. Now, with the likes of XPan and Huion, I think, there are other companies, I think a lot rising from China, that are challenging them in the, in the tablet space. But here's what they did, right? They basically did a promotional image for their New Year's sale that, is an AI generation. This led, essentially, to a bunch of people doing takedowns. Megan, Rose, Ruiz, amongst others. Megan's specifically, theirs was, multiple minutes, very in-depth, very fun to watch, that is absolutely just showing what this is, which is, of course, an AI generation. I mean, take a look at it, and you can certainly see, look at all these proportions and stuff in and around the neck. And for a lot of people, they would sort of say, come on, you're Wacom. You guys, number one, should know better, and also should know that this would easily be found out. But no, obviously not. So that didn't go down well. Many artists said they would be switching brands, and even for us recently, to be honest with you, we actually did get a Huion tablet. It made the most sense given the amount of budget that we had, the specs that we actually needed, and the size of the tablet. It was very, very cost competitive with Wacom, and while some things are not as good as Wacom, it is pretty damn close, and many would say better value for the money. So absolutely, Wacom, this is not the time for you to be setting people against you. Our story, though, does continue on, and unfortunately it continues into a game that we actually really do all kind of love, Apex Legends. I mean, even if you don't play it, you can certainly admit how they do their characters, just how they've done so much has been really good. So they're getting their first Fortnite-style merch event, and I definitely want to talk about that soon, because I mean, come on, are you guys also tired of everything being Fortnite-ified, right? Just brands invading everywhere you go? It's kind of frustrating, but anyway, as a part of that, obviously, they had to do a trailer, and that trailer meant lots of marketing assets. In terms of mechanical things, the event's pretty cool. Like, you can get a Buster Sword in the game, that's neat. There's also a time-limited mode, a whole bunch of cool skins. It's got a limited release cosmetic Deathbox skin that you only get after buying $330 of event loot boxes. Whew, that's rather pricey. But here's the deal. The advertisement, the trailer, because people noticed, right? They did these flourishes to show off the paid skins, and the flourish is basically happening as they are rendered in the more sort of like anime manga style. Now, this is something you could manually do in Photoshop, right? It's not entirely dissimilar to some filters people will have used in Snapchat or TikTok. Or, of course, if you were there for the Corridor Digital drama, of course, you'll know the channel Corridor Digital, Corridor Crew. They really did kick up quite the stink. They were making quite a few like AI workflow-based videos. And to be honest with you, it's one of those things where is exploring the technology, I suppose, like interesting? Yes. They're obviously approaching that from the perspective of being VFX professionals, which I suppose is a fairly tools-driven perspective, and one that's quite different from, say, that of the artists. But basically they were trying to like recreate Spider-Verse style effects and some stuff in their videos. They did so using AI stuff. Of course, the problem there is, like, yeah, you know, did they create a sort of cool anime filter? Yeah, they did. Does it have problems when you look close? Yes, absolutely. Will it be production ready? No, absolutely not. But of course, the thing there is, it wasn't trained off their assets. It was trained off other people's assets. And for a lot of people, that is then wading into a fairly troublesome ethical area. And some of those people do include the decision makers over at Valve with Steam, so that'll be fairly interesting. But anyway, what people did is they broke these images down. They started looking for a lot of like the artifacting, the sort of telltale signs that some AI generations are being used. So here's the deal. Is this an example of some sort of AI filter being applied, or is this an example of essentially the effect being done by hand and people just not doing a perfect job? As of the time of writing, okay, for this one, Respawn have not responded to the criticisms. They have not deleted the video. They have been working with a third-party studio called Darkburn Creative for just about all of the Apex Legends video stuff since the game was revealed, so maybe we would have to see what they would say. Maybe this is also a bit more complicated because it involves an external partner, and therefore, before Respawn would actually talk about it, they'd probably do a bit of an investigation to work out what the hell is happening, because their community managers will be very aware that there is a problem. Now, to move on to another company, it's Wizards of the Coast. Yep, Wizards of the Coast obviously dominated the news last year, including for some AI-related stories, and actually, the microphone broke yesterday, so I'm back to do the rest of the video with a fresh jumper. How exciting! Now then, Wizards of the Coast, they've been rather naughty boys, as it would seem. Magic the Gathering's latest card set is framed around a detective story, right? There's a new mechanic that is built on gathering clues. All pretty cool. And speaking of clues, let's just review the evidence from last year. Wizards of the Coast, in case you don't remember, had a rather spicy 2023. So there's the OGL disaster in and around the licensing of their rule set. The next thing is Magic players just feeling like the thing was getting ridiculous financially. Of course, with games like this, yeah, you can trade the cards, there's value in the cards, but in order to keep up with things, you're going to want to get the new sets. Now, of course, Wizards, or maybe Hasbro controlling Wizards, kind of realized, hang on a second, we seem to make some money when we release sets of cards. Let's do more sets. The hobby gets more expensive, people get less happy, and that sort of is the way that it is. I mean, hey, maybe you could get away with that when everybody over in the States had their, their COVID check or something, but absolutely not something that they were able to get away with. Will management listen to this? Who the hell knows, but apparently the creatives have said that they are aware of it. Then, of course, we move on to the Pinkertons. Yes, the Pinkertons are somehow involved with this. Back in the day, they used to do things like busting down riots, absolutely just whacking people who were trying to do things like form unions. And now the Pinkertons have found themselves trying to get pre-release Magic the Gathering cards from people who acquired them too early. But of course, being the Pinkertons, they still are a little bit threatening and menacing. So that's a really lovely story. Then, of course, in August, we had the fun of a long-term contributing artist for an upcoming D&D book being accused of using AI for their work. They revealed, right, that they did use it in the polishing stage. Then Wizard stepped in and they confirmed that this would not be happening going forwards. They basically said that, well, no generative art should be used as a part of the process in Magic the Gathering art. And with that, a lot of people wouldn't have expected today's story to happen, but that'll happen in a second. Then in December, there was another accusation that was being made again about AI in the art. And also in December, Hasbro laid off 1,000 people. So I'm sure that that was just really nice for people over at Wizards of the Coast. And on that, we even had the likes of some people at Larian, of course, hot off Baldur's Gate 3, basically say, yeah, loads of the people that we worked with, interfaced with over at Wizards, they're now gone. So it's a real bright, happy time over at Wizards of the Coast, and this is basically what happened, this promotional art. So take a look at it, and you'll see the cards are fine, but zoom in on the details, such as this. I mean, just everything being bizarre and ever so slightly off, and you will realize, yep, there is generative AI being used here. Now, this was actually found in more of the promotional assets. Then the social media team cited, of course, the company policy by saying that, no, this was all made by a human. It very obviously was not all made by a human, and later they did have to walk it back, saying, well, we made a mistake when we said a marketing image was not created by AI. They then went on to explain what the hell happened, and it goes like this. A third-party vendor was preparing marketing materials for them. They were using industry-standard tools that made use of generative material. My read of that is they're using the latest version of Photoshop, which does have generative fill, I would imagine, which is a very useful sort of tool, which, I mean, really the intent of the tool is like, you know, if you want to remove somebody from a photo or, you know, you're sort of touching stuff up, it's kind of meant for like that. Mostly. Of course, when it gets into art, things get a little bit more spicy and interesting, don't they? They then said that Wizards have changed their policy to now also cover third-party vendors not using generative AI for anything that they produce, but of course, they themselves do bear the responsibility for not scrutinizing this enough and ultimately for hitting the go button and publishing it. And it's that last bit that is actually important there, because if they weren't outsourcing a lot of this to third parties, and if they hadn't just laid off a bunch of people and maybe had the time and resources, then perhaps they would have, been able to have the oversight to catch this mistake. Because, to be honest, looking at it, it's pretty damn clear that there's AI-generated work there. And as if this isn't cheery enough already, I do have a little bit of seasoning for the story, and that is some court entry suggesting that the Midjourney CEO, David Holtz, was actively bragging about basically using a hell of a lot of Magic the Gathering artists' work when basically seeding Midjourney. So that's really cool. I'm sure people feel fantastic about that. So there you go. You cannot trust your third parties not to use tech that is being trained on what many would allege is stolen work, a problem that, of course, is pretty damn serious for people working in games because of Steam's policies. How could this get worse? Well, let's talk about a game that's not going to happen. Now, this comes from Xavier Nelson, who's worked on many different video games. You may remember him as the guy who did the tweets talking about basically the way games are developed, scale, sort of realistic expectations, that I think very inadvertently kicked off a large drama with Baldur's Gate 3, even though I think there's really nothing wrong with anything that Xavier himself actually said. So, here's an interesting situation that him and his company have ran into. Basically, they wanted to make a game, an airport for aliens currently ran by dogs. But they kind of ran into problems here. So here's the situation. They were prototyping this game, and they were adding stock images, right, of dogs, right? Just some stock images to mark out some NPCs. And then they just kind of realized these stock images can be really funny. How about we just pivot the entire game to being an absurdist comedy? There you go. That could be a cool little thing. It would certainly stand out in the market. That's when they kind of ran into a problem. So there's a few things here. Steam. Unless you can 100% claim that you have the license to everything in your game, you can't publish in Steam. Now, that's a bit of a problem if you're using stock images. You may think, but they're stock images. You've licensed them. Ha, here's the problem. I'm sure you've seen loads of the AI grifters, be it on X, be it on YouTube. I'd also recommend you check out a video by Kyle Hill, which is going through how a lot of the generative AI stuff is actually being just really damaging for science communication right now, especially on YouTube. So, all those grifters exist. Do you not think they're just going to try to generate tens of thousands of stock images and mass upload them to stock image websites? Those generations, will they have full copyright too? We're seeing emerging sort of legal whiffs of the answer to that being no. Now, I'd imagine if you're using, say, the Adobe stuff, like the generative AI within Photoshop, because that is based off the Adobe stock library, I would have to assume that that is right by the licenses, but certainly if it's Dolly, if it is Midjourney, no, you're going to be in trouble. And you probably, well, look, can you use that for production art? I suppose you can, but you do run the risk of problems down the line. That's all really fun. And ultimately, this then means that the people who are running the stock libraries will have to probably use an AI to find out which images are made by the AI. And realistically, those are probably going to be highly similar AIs. So you're basically just going to have AIs fighting AIs, and that's basically where we are left. Just that it isn't, because a lot of companies definitely want to go whole hog into this. And here is just a fun little snippet from Takashi Kiryu, who is of course the president of Square Enix. You know, Square Enix, who went headlong into crypto stuff and, you know, generated lots of fun headlines. Well, they've said, we intend to be aggressive in applying AI and other cutting-edge technologies to both our content development and our publishing functions. In the short term, our goal is to enhance our development productivity and achieve greater sophistication in our marketing efforts. Yeah, so basically, that greater sophistication probably just means trying to just have more AI-generated bells and whistles and tweets and, you know, associated marketing things. Potentially using, is it Runway ML? Is it called Runway ML? I think it's the video one. Some people have sort of made some, I guess, like trippy-looking visuals using that. Maybe they'd be trying to do that for their marketing videos. Of course, for video games, the worst of it would be just using generative AI instead of, you know, actual artistry. Now, where that stuff can be a bit more useful is replacing trudgery. As an example, an AI model to do rotoscoping, which is a royal pain in the ass. That, pretty cool. Another example was in entertainment. They're using some AI-based tool to basically resize helmets onto the faces or the skulls of different playable races. And that basically saves loads of development time, and it's a task that nobody really enjoys doing. That is really good. It means that their artists can, you know, go and actually make more art, which is class. Just that, seeing a very similar thing, Duolingo actually decided to lay off their contracted translators in use that has very recently broke this year, where instead they're just simply having people review AI-generated work instead because basically it's good enough. So there you go, a little bit of a glimpse into hell. I think the main takeaway here is that this is all just a Wild West. Steam have tried to just be very, you know, we do not want to deal with this until there is a firm solution, we're out. As for the rest of the industry, we're going to have the AIs that are making assets, and then the AIs that are being trained to spot the assets that the other AIs are making. And then the legal system will very slowly move through this, and maybe in 5 to 10 years, between, you know, proper decisions and case law, we'll actually know what we can do with this sort of thing. Ultimately, the downside as I see it, I guess, you know, I say throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to the AI stuff. And a lot of people, I think a lot of artists would hear that and maybe have a little bit of a gut reaction. But in this case, like, the baby is the likes of actually using AI to process medical images. So that there are, you know, you have, I suppose, higher sensitivity and specificity whenever, say, you know, MRIs are being viewed. Very important. Some of these AI models being used for drug discovery, for things that are genuinely extremely useful for humanity. That is the real good side of these new technologies. It's just that as consumers, we are, I think, disproportionately, and of course a creative industry that is catered towards those consumers, we just happen to be disproportionately exposed to the negatives of this new technology. So ultimately, that's the situation. That's my take. Let me know what yours is. Thanks for tuning in. You can check out this video next. And with that said, check out bellular.ghost.io to support us, and I'll see you next time.